Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the latest episodes of the Jason's Take On podcast with myself, Jason Noble, here in a very cold and dark London in the UK, and my partner in crime, Mr. Whitehead. Say hello, Jason.
Hello, Jason.
Today, we have another very special guest with us today. A very warm welcome to Alan Fecamp, the head of customer success and the commercial practice at Xeren, executive recruitment and headhunting firm that work with innovative businesses to really help accelerate their growth. And Alan, I think I've known you for a couple of years now. You are, I think, one of the few recruiters out there, the exec recruiters, with a real focus on customer success and commercial growth. And I know you've been driving this focus and change for a number of years. So really excited to have you here. I think when we were first met, you were back at Pi Recruitment, which I believe you'd come from your own business, Just Digital, and just acquired that. So a great journey you've been through.
Yeah,
I think your expertise is all around SaaS scale-ups, startups, and that really accelerated growth journey. And I think what a journey it's been over the last couple of years, particularly coming into where we are now at the end of 2022.
Yeah.
Your emphasis has always been on the post-sale side of it. And I think you've worked with if I'm correct, something like 150 companies now, helping them build teams. So
probably gone up now, Jason. Thanks for having me on, by the way.
But I think it's awesome. I think you're also massively involved in CS community, and we just missed catching up at Pulse. So really warm welcome. Super excited to have you here. Please, in your own words, could you just tell our listeners a bit about your own journey to Xeren, to Pi, and then your own business and what's been your motivation in customer success?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me on, both of you. Much appreciated. So yeah, I suppose that the whistle stop tour is career recruiter, 23 years, I think it is, all in commercial recruitment, going through scale-up journeys with those particular companies. Ventured into the SaaS world back in 2009 when I formed Just Digital, by accident, in truth. So Just Digital was set up to be a digital marketing and e-commerce recruitment company. And by association to being in a digital world, we attracted lots of MarTech businesses to us who didn't have a home to go to from a recruitment perspective. So that digital marketing and e-commerce recruitment company very quickly pivoted, to coin a startup expression, to becoming a B2B SaaS specialist within a few months. And we never looked back. It was only a boutique-y small specialist agency, never more than 10 heads, but really carved out a niche working with C through Series B, high growth businesses that had some investor capital put in, whether they be US founded, UK founded. I really wanted to go on that scaling journey. And our role within that was helping them build out the GTM. The pathway into CS came about halfway through that time. And that was really when customer success was taking off. And I can remember it now, the conversations being, is it an account management role? Those account management roles suddenly became customer success roles. And alongside the business growth journey, I spent most of my personal time as a recruiter figuring out what this CS thing was, and it just took off and started to build year on year. Going back about 3.5 years now, I exited that business to Pi, and that was born out of wanting to go on a scaling journey, moving away from what was a lifestyle business. So we did a JV, and that went very well for a few years. And then fast forward to where I am now, I'm at Xeren doing more of the same, but on a bigger scale. Yeah, that's the whistle stop tour. So really, like the takeaway is the last 7+ years has all been in customer success for me. So majority of my personal billing time has been helping scale CS teams.
I think you seeing someone like yourself that's got that industry experience and you've seen CS come into its own being and then move to that focus it's quite unique. There are lots of organizations around recruitment that say they're doing it, but a lot are struggling with it. And I know in the couple of years that I've known you, we've seen some big changes in the industry, marketplace, and the economy, as we said. How do you see the world of recruitment today in customer success? What are founders, CEOs, and investors looking for in leaders and the hires that you're putting in?
So the recruitment world is interesting. So I suppose from a me and competition standpoint, I think what you'll find as a candidate is lots of sales recruitment companies trying to hire for CSMs, assuming it's an extension of sales. So I think that's the difficult challenge to navigate as a candidate. I think what we tend to walk into is an educational play. We're often dealing with a founder or perhaps a CRO that is come up through the sales route and is probably less well versed in customer success. And quite often when we're going in to talk about the brief and what they want to do, what their understanding is of CS, it's quite apparent quite quickly that there's a lot of education required from us around what type of CS leader they need. So we would dig into things like their revenue model, their customer journey, what kind of CS motion they're looking to build. And quite often you're asking these questions and there isn't a clear answer coming back. So you're having to take them on a bit of an educational tour to actually get to the point where you're telling them really what type of profile that they should be hiring into their business.
How does that change the relationship you've got? Because are they looking for the right people? Are they just thinking they need CS?
No, I think what happens is it is tied to stage of growth and funding round. Generally, post Series A, retention really comes into the spotlight. That's shifting to NRR right now for obvious reasons. But I think for as long as I can remember, that retention number was key in how an investor would look at your Series B round or how they would value your business. So I think I don't think it's. I suppose for a time it was a nice to have. Everyone else is doing it. I should probably do it. But then I think it got serious 4-5 years ago, and I think there was a real commercial awareness around just how much revenue was attributable post sale, and that's when it started to grow up. And there was a lot more value placed on it. But even now, as we're seeing in the current market, there's a lot of people being laid off and so forth. It's got a seat at the table, but whether it's the same seat that sales has, debatable. Yeah. So I think it's got serious. I think founders, leadership teams do value CS an awful lot more. Not all of them understand what inputs they need to put in place in their CS functions to deliver the right outputs. And I think it is that educational piece in there and just trying to drive that value from a leadership perspective. And you guys all know this, trying to drive it back up the chain to actually articulate what value CS brings to the business isn't always that straightforward.
It's like commercial value. What commercial value does it have? And how I think there's an impatience sometimes. You want to see a return on that investment quite quickly.
Yeah.
And it's understanding what that return will be and actually what timeframes you should look at.
Yeah, I think so. Quite often the briefs that we get, there might be a CS team in place, but they haven't hired a head of, director of, VP, leader before, and it's come in and there isn't necessarily always a problem to fix like a churn issue. It's come in and overlay a framework over something that is there, but we don't know why it's good. Yeah, they're not. If it's onboarding, they're not measuring time to value, time to live. They're not doing any of the basic framework stuff that enables them to report back effectively to the board or actually to work effectively with their customers. So quite often that's the scenario in these Series A businesses. It's right, we need somebody to come in and actually show us what great looks like, design the playbook, execute it for us. And you're telling the leadership team what needs to be done. That's quite a common brief that we'll get.
Wow, that's fascinating to see how it's going there. As I think about where we are, some interesting economic times and some pivot points where you still see a lot of CS jobs being advertised and people struggle to find qualified candidates, not candidates, but qualified ones. And then in the next breath, we hear a lot more people putting the brakes on hiring and things are slowing down and people have recessionary fears. How are you seeing things evolve today? And what do you see as the biggest challenges and sort of where are we and where do you think it's going to be in the next few months?
It's a really good question. I've tested a theory here. So during Nick Mehta's opening speech at Pulse, he quoted a stat from Bain where I think they'd surveyed 1,000 companies and 90% were either intending on preserving their CS function or expanding it in 2023. So I put a poll out on LinkedIn last week just to test that theory. And actually, it's bang on. So I've had over 200 votes on it so far, all from CS people in CS hiring positions, and 48% are intending on expanding. It's only 8% are intending on reducing headcount in CS next year. So I'll take that. I'm taking a lot of confidence from that. That said, my inbox from a individual contributor perspective in CS has got busier. So I think there is some movement in the market. At an IC level, I spoke to one CS leader today who's down. He's lost 3 people out of a team of 20. So I think what you're going to see is probably a higher number of accounts per CSM. Is quite likely. So if you're losing some heads, obviously expecting to do more with less. I'm pretty confident we're not going to see real big numbers flood into the market. We did see that during COVID. And I think people then struggled to hire quickly enough on the other side of it and got burnt. So I'm hopeful that the CS space will hold up pretty well during 2023. It's really busy from a leadership perspective. So there's lots of roles around. If you look around on LinkedIn, I'm seeing new stuff every day still. Lots of people pop up in my feed having landed new roles. So it still feels busy out there.
Right.
We've had lots of pitches, lots of inbound. It still feels pretty busy. We don't have a crystal ball, but right now it feels like it's in a reasonable place.
That's good to hear. Any predictions on if there is a slowdown, how long you think it would last for the CS recruitment? I'm
not an economist, but I think the general rule is like the cuts all seem to be like 25% of headcount. I think it'll go with a recession, whatever recession we end up in, which everyone's assuming we will. I think it will follow that pattern. But actually, I'm pretty hopeful that once you find a bottom in any market, that's when he starts to build back out of it. So I think if we get a tough spot, it's probably going to be in the first couple of quarters of next year.
How are you seeing the quality of kind of candidates in the marketplace? Because there's lots of new people coming in. Again, at Pulse event, it was really interesting to see the number of people that hadn't been at Pulse event before, and that I think is indicative of the number of new people coming in. But what are you seeing like in terms of the quality and level of experience of the people versus the roles that you've got to match them up with?
Yeah, I think so. My focus being primarily leadership. If I look at the UK, it's a tiny pool of VPs of CS, 374 to be precise. That's not a big number when you overlay that with the thousands and thousands of B2B SaaS companies out there that in theory will need a CS leader at some stage. There'll be more once you tear that down to director and head of, then there's a bigger number. I think there's lots of people going in at mid-market, and I think that's where the churn will likely happen if there is some fallout. Those kind of higher velocity, probably 18 months to 3 years of experience, lower touch type plays that can be automated, where some of the scale methodology kicks in, that can probably be soaked up into some of those higher velocity type CS motions. If I think there's going to be some fallout, it will likely be there. There's lots of new people into the market because it's such a big growth area. The growth in CS leadership year on year at VP level has been 66% increase in people on LinkedIn carrying that VP title. It's still growing. There aren't enough people. So you'd think that supply demand thing is playing into all of our favors at the moment.
So when you think of with so many new people coming into it and coming into their first VP role that may have never had them before, what advice do you give to candidates to say this is how you can really distinguish yourself and here's where you need to prove that you can deliver excellence to a potential employer?
Yeah, this isn't CS specific. I think it's about the growth mindset stuff. And actually, and CS, we're blessed with so many communities and people wanting to help. And actually the challenge is finding your way to the right material because there's so much content out there. I would say from a CS perspective or from anybody's perspective, use the resources available to you in the market. You've got some great communities out there like Gain, Grow, Retain, and a list of amazing podcasts like this one. Absorb it, learn from the people that have been doing it for a long time and invest that time to try and better yourself, learn new methodologies. There's been some great articles posted recently about where CS is heading in 2023 and what impact that's going to mean from a revenue perspective. You really just need to digest as much of that content as possible and formulate your own opinion and perspective on what's going to happen. I think the people that interview you well turn up with an opinion. It's quite a common question for an interviewer to ask you, what does CS mean to you? And it's quite an ambiguous one. And if you're fairly junior and you've just landed in CS, it's probably quite a hard one to answer. So I think just forming a really educated opinion and using the content out there will make a massive difference to you to upskill yourself.
I like that thinking because it's something that still, I think it's one of the challenges we've got is that the definition is very different for different organizations and individuals. But I think what it shows is that thinking, you want someone to understand that it's a commercial mindset, that it's a go-to-market function, and that can come out in that question.
Yeah, it can come out in that question and just have a holistic view of the different CS models out there, some being more commercial than others. If you've got that knowledge, it means you're probably going to apply to the right types of companies for you and find the right home for you based upon what you feel comfortable doing as a CSM. So I think just learn as much as you can, and CS, you're blessed with having more means to do that than most other functions.
What are your thoughts as we go into next year? What are you What are you expecting to happen in the industry? What are your thoughts about what needs to change? What would you like to see change?
Yeah, thoughts on trends, scale, digital CS and scale. It's coming up daily at the moment. The need to do more with less is driving that, obviously, from a cost perspective. I think that is going to be really tough for companies to hire into. There are so few scale people out there that have done it and are seasoned in it. I've run multiple searches for scale CSMs and scale leaders. It's a tiny amount of people that actually have true expertise in that. Often they're coming out of the product-led growth companies because they're great at it. So I think that's the change that we'll see next year, is a real uptick in demand for digital CSMs and scale CSMs. I love that area. I find it fascinating. It was pretty apparent that Pulse, there was a big theme around that for obvious reasons, obviously trying to drive the community and so on. Those were the really interesting tracks I jumped into. So interesting to see how that plays out next year and how companies plug that skill set gap.
Yeah,
sure.
I think that's always going to be a challenge when there is such demand and not enough qualified people in there. What advice do you give to hiring managers around that, where say, hey, this may not be the perfect fit or the perfect experience that you're looking for, but either given your budget or expertise, how do you guide them to come up with the next best candidate and
Yeah, I think account velocity. Yeah, as long as it's been some level of automation and some level of one-to-many activities. If you've got a CS leader who's managing multiple segments and they've got a higher number of low-value customers at the bottom end of their funnel, in theory, they should be applying some type of digital CS motion in there. You can look to do that. They won't be a pure play digital CS expert, but they should have exposure to it. And I'd apply that on a CSM level as well. People that are managing high volumes of customers should, in theory, have some level of digital CS expertise. Generally, when you're hiring for those digital CSMs, they're not coming from pure play CS backgrounds. They're coming from CS ops, possibly marketing. Quite often they're coming from a real broad range of backgrounds, because if you look at the skill set that's required around kind of content creation, running webinars, marketing, building out communities, there's quite a heavy marketing skill set in there. So if you've got somebody that's got some customer facing experience plus some marketing, maybe some CS ops, blending those skill sets together on a CSM individual contributor level, that tends to work quite well as well.
In the conversations you have with kind of the CEOs and founders, what are their biggest gaps that they're coming to you with? How are they seeing things when they're looking to you to help them build out their commercial teams, their GTM strategies? What are the biggest issues for them?
On a CS level, sorry, or just on a general?
Just generally, what are the biggest challenges they're seeing, and what are they coming to you guys for? Why are they saying, look, we need help?
Yeah, it's all leadership. It's leadership challenges, whether it be a CRO, VP sales, VP CS. I think finding the right leader that wraps around their sales motion or their CS motion, that's where they struggle. We've done an assignment recently for a VP of CS for an e-commerce tech business, 12,000 customers, 2,000 paying customers. How do we drive operational change into this business? And actually, we're now doing a VP of sales. We've done a VP of product, and the remit across all of them was fairly similar. It's all about aligning to the type of customer, lower ACV. That's where the challenge is from these founders. They're looking for us to help them solve. It's not just, right, we need somebody that's built out a great CS team. It gets really granular into the type of customer, the ACV, sales velocity, and that's where you have to get really deep into the market to find the right profile. So that's where we're helping them, is going out doing these big research pieces and market mapping and figuring out there are only 10 people in the world that exist that do what you're looking for, and breaking the bad news to them that they might have to change their minds or concede on certain areas.
I find many organizations that must be one of the most interesting parts of the job as well, is that market research and actually realizing there is a small number of people that fit everything you ask for. But do you find these organizations, are they looking for industry vertical experience? So you mentioned about the e-commerce role. Do they see that as being critical versus someone being a commercial customer success leader? What are you seeing the trend there? Yeah,
it depends on stage of growth. So sub 10 million, I think the main expertise, sub 10 million ARR, the main expertise tends to be at the forefront of people's minds. If it's really early stage, you're going to have that dynamic with the CS leader working closely with the product team, because they're probably still scrapping around trying to get product market fit, and you need that relationship to work. Once scale kicks in and the product market fit is there, rarely see a brief that requires domain expertise. Okay. It's much more around how you work operationally. Yeah, team size, customer numbers, tooling, growth journey, and ACV. Those are the things that you're really aligned to. If you kind of work in that framework, you're pretty close to finding the right match.
This is Jason, you and I have had, there's another podcast that we've got about exactly this.
Yeah.
Is it industry or domain experience versus that leadership thing? I think this was the conclusion that we came to as well, that there's as organizations grow and scale, that the focus is on, I need someone that understands how this leadership piece works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to actually pin a number on it, but I think the general market perception is in or around that 10 million ARR mark. My view is it's actually partly linked to funding round as well.
Yeah. I think the latter, definitely.
Yeah, the VCs, PE companies will drive the thinking on that for sure.
Wow. Alan, thank you so much for being with us. We've loved your insights here. Before we go, we always like to ask everyone a bold challenge question. And you're looking into your crystal ball, how do you see CS and commercial recruitment evolving in the next 3 to 5 years?
Oof, that's a question, isn't it? Everyone else goes out of business and it's just left with Zeren. What's going to happen? I think, what am I seeing right now? Yeah, I think we need to have deep functional expertise is going to become more and more, and this is through the lens of technology focused recruitment companies. That deep level of expertise, functional alignment is going to really become beneficial. I think we touched on at the start of the call, I think me sitting with a founder, business leader and talking CS shop for 2 hours, I think that's what people are buying into, rather than the traditional, we're working with 5 agencies and we want loads of CVs through the door quickly. I think that's fine at an individual contributor level to a point, but I think it can get more granular and sophisticated. You're going to get better outcomes from your hiring and better performing people into your business. And I think that's where it will go. I think we've seen more retained agencies crop up over the last 2 years. More people pushing for retained work because it's harder to fill jobs and they want to protect themselves. And I think that drives a higher level of expectation from the customer as well. Recruitment's got a bad rep out there. I think lots of people in my profession don't do themselves any favors. And I think what you're going to see over the next year in particular is the standards being driven up because people are going to be really fighting hard for business. And I think that's a good thing.
Alan, a massive thank you, as Jason said, really interesting. I love as I said, I've known you for a few years. The domain expertise really shines through. And I think it's just so nice and refreshing just to hear really how it is, because it's a massively changing, fast changing market as well, and something that's evolved massively. So to get your insight is really great. Big thank you.
No, I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Of course, and before you go, we always like to invite you to do a shameless plug. So if you want to plug your company, yourself, whatever it is, let people know.
Yeah, love to. So I'll tell you about Zeren. So Zeren are owned by an executive search business called Renovata, who are a 20+ year C-suite operator, who also have their own private equity fund as well called L Capital. They're heavily involved in the investor world. Formed Zeren about 5 years ago, really to go on a longer journey with the technology companies that we recruit for. So what was tending to happen is they'd place a CEO, a question would come in, can you help us find a chief revenue officer or a VP sales or a VP CS? Invariably, the answer would be no, because they were so heavily tied to that C-level. And that's why Zeren was formed. So Zeren now operates across, it really reflects our customers. So we have the commercial team, which is where I sit, which is everything GTM. We have the technology team, which is engineering, products, and data. And then we have the operations team, which is finance, people, and strategy. So we really align ourselves to the kind of core areas of the clients that we recruit for. Our world is really partnering with the VCs and private equity companies across their portcos. So we'll go in and build out the leadership teams and then actually do big team build projects beneath that once we've executed at a senior level. So yeah, we work with some amazing customers and lots of them. So yeah, that's the Zeren plug. And I'm here to do the CS piece, is the final part.
Excellent. So we appreciate that so much. Check out Zeren if you're in the market for recruitment, and we'll catch you again soon on the Jason's Take On. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.